joined now in the studio by the Transport Secretary, Mark Harper. Mr Harper, lovely to have you in here. But shall we start with this deeply damning report from the police inspector? Incredibly worrying, not least, of course, because of Sarah Everard and repeated instances of misogyny within the police force. What needs to happen for the police to get their house in order?
Well, look, first of all, I think it's worth remembering this report was commissioned by Priti Patel when she was Home Secretary in the wake of the Sarah Everard murder. And it does contain a very worrying number of findings. And I think it's a real wake-up call for chief constables across the country. So, I mean, what the government hopes is that those chief constables and, the National Police Chiefs Council will look at this report, and every force will look at their practices, how they recruit officers, how they run their disciplinary processes, and make the necessary changes to improve standards so the public have the confidence in the police force.
That is the key point, isn't it? When you have the inspectorate saying that there are hundreds, perhaps thousands of bad apples, and we're being very mild with the language, they're bad apples, it seems almost impossible to me that you can restore confidence in the police until that situation is entirely resolved.
Well, look, I think the first thing is, yes, the report has a number of concerning findings. But on the other hand, the positive thing is it's much better that we understand the scale of the challenge, we understand what the problems are. That's the first thing you have to do to be able to fix them. And the Home Secretary has made it very clear that this is an important priority for her, it's an important priority for government, but ultimately this is up to chief constables, and they've now got the information in front of them, and the government will expect them to act on the recommendations and the findings of the report, and the government will do what it can to support them in delivering that, so the public can have the confidence in the police force that they need.
Indeed. It would be remiss to have the Transport Secretary in and not talk about your brief. We will do that just a little later in the interview, but I think we need to start with Manston. Currently, what is the situation in there? The latest on numbers, do we have an idea? It was above 4,000, which is at the very least 2 to 3 times the capacity for this facility.
Well, look, as you know, the Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, visited the site with the local Member of Parliament, Sir Roger Gale, at the weekend. And I know it's a priority now for him and for the Home Secretary to enable us to get migrants out of that site faster than they're arriving, to reduce the pressure. That has started to happen, but of course I think it's reasonable to say it's not going to happen overnight. I mean, I've been an immigration minister in the past. There are no simple solutions here. They're very difficult, but the government is putting the steps in place to procure more accommodation, to start work or to continue working with our partners in France to reduce the numbers that are coming. And over time, we'll be able to reduce the numbers in that camp to what they should be. And in fact, it was only a relatively few weeks ago that it was working very well. And it's
well, you say that. The inspectorate report identified problems dating back as far as July. It did say that the camp was functional at that point. It clearly isn't functional at the moment. I mean, the latest development is the Prison Officers Association coming out and suggesting that we could be close to riots within there because of the conditions. That rather speaks to a desperate need to improve the staffing numbers inside Manston right now.
Well, look, I think Manston's not designed as a large-scale holding centre.
That is what it's being used for at the moment. That's the problem,
but it's designed to have people there for a short period of time before they're then moved into other accommodation. So that's what the Immigration Minister is focused on. I think progress has started to be made on that, but it's clearly not going to be dealt with overnight. But it's the number one priority for the Home Office, and it's a very significant priority for the government. And I've talked to both the Home Secretary and the Immigration Minister about it, and I know they're very focused on making progress on a daily basis.
As you mentioned, you yourself were an Immigration Minister back 2013, 2014.
That's right.
Yeah. You understand the necessity to use temperate language when talking around this issue. Was it right that Suella Braverman described the situation as an invasion on our south coast? Well,
look, I think it's important for the public, because the public's very concerned about this issue and actually has been for many years. I think it's very important that the Home Secretary demonstrates to the public that she understands the scale of the problem, so that the public have the confidence that she and the Immigration Minister are going to put the appropriate focus on dealing with it. And, there are no easy solutions here, but we can deal with it. When I was Immigration Minister, we had a huge problem with people coming in trucks.
I know, but we're talking about the language here. With respect, we're talking about the language here, Mr Harper. Would you have used the phrase an invasion on the south coast?
Well, look...
In the immediate aftermath of a petrol bomb attack on a migrant holding facility?
Every politician chooses to express themselves in the way that they do. And I think what was important, the Home Secretary was trying to convey to the House of Commons that she understood the scale of the challenge so that people at home who are concerned about this issue know that it's an important priority for her and for the Home Office to deal with this problem. And I think actually the public understanding that politicians get that this is a real problem
Indeed.
actually can help people feel reassured that someone gets the problem and is focused on dealing with it, which is actually a good thing, not a bad thing.
I get that, but again, inflammatory language such as that has been seen as an incitement to violence by people within your own party. You yourself, back when you were an immigration minister, were responsible for those go-home vans. And you remember yourself, I'm sure, very, very well, the criticism that you received at the time from people who had come here as refugees, from people who had come here as economic migrants because of the tone that was struck. Does the Conservative Party sometimes, or the right of the Conservative Party, sometimes have a problem with the language it deploys, clearly reaching out to certain parts of the community like this? I mean, you were pilloried for this.
Well, some people criticise me, but, I mean, they're very clear. They're about whether people who are here illegally or not. I'm very clear. Our country welcomes people who come here legally. We provide safe refuge for people fleeing from war and persecution. You know, we've had a fantastic response from both the government and the public for people fleeing from the war in Ukraine. You know, we've got 140,000 people here who we've made welcome.
There are no safe routes here unless you are from Hong Kong, Ukraine, or indeed Afghanistan. The only way that people can get here is across the Channel in small boats.
But with respect, people who are in France are in a safe country, and we've always been clear that people should seek asylum in the first safe country there is.
You may have been clear, but they don't have to listen to you. Legally, they don't have to listen to you.
People who are in France are safe. They're not fleeing from France, so they're actually in a safe place. And we've been clear, and I was very encouraged last week. The Prime Minister had an introductory call with President Macron, and I think they agreed that both of our countries would continue to work together and would step up our cooperation, because we're only going to deal with this issue if we work closely with our partners in France.
Do you think France is doing enough?
Well, I think both countries, Britain and France, could both do more. So what we need to do is work with the French. They do a lot already. We provide resources to help them. And, of course, people will know that our border controls in France are actually physically located in France, and we've always worked in close partnership with French authorities. Do we think they could do more? Yes. We could do more as well, and it's about improving that partnership, and that's why that conversation with the Prime Minister and the President was so welcome.
Let's hope that bears fruit. Before we just get on to transport, on taxation, Treasury sources yesterday appeared to confirm that we are about to see tax rises across the board. Is that your understanding?
Well, look, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor have both been clear in the autumn statement that we've obviously got to set out a very credible fiscal plan. We are going to have to make difficult decisions. It would be quite wrong for me to speculate on those. So I'm not going to go beyond what either the Prime Minister or the Chancellor have said already. But we are going to have to make difficult decisions. And it's important, if we produce an autumn statement that is credible, that will mean that we bear down on inflation more quickly. And why that matters to people listening to this programme is that means we'll be able to have inflation, interest rates lower than they would otherwise be, which obviously directly feeds through into people's mortgages. So a credible plan is going to require tough decisions, but obviously the Chancellor will lay out both sides of the ledger, as it were, the tax measures and spending measures in one place on the 17th of November.
Let's go to your brief then, shall we? And a big decision that you have to make regards High Speed 2 and the Northern Powerhouse Rail Link. Can you confirm whether or not you will be upholding what Liz Truss promised at the Conservative Party conference, that you will be building that high-speed line in full from Manchester to Leeds via Bradford?
So two things. First of all, on High Speed 2, because there were various stories that popped up at the weekend, the government remains committed to delivering High Speed 2 on time and within budget.
Very specifically, though, on that high-speed line between Manchester and Leeds with that station in Bradford.
Well, look, I think it's fair to say, as things that the former Prime Minister said, Rishi Sunak made it clear when he became Prime Minister that for all the best motives, a number of mistakes were made, and he was elected as Prime Minister in part to fix them. So we're going back to our 2019 manifesto, looking at the commitments we made. We have got a commitment to make sure we can get high-speed trains to Leeds. And what we're doing in my department and what I've been briefed on is we're looking at all of the options that are available to do that.
I will be hasn't been taken.
No, I will be looking at all of the options to do that in light of the decisions we take in the autumn statement, and then we'll be setting out our plans in due course.
But you can understand the level of frustration.
And I've only, of course, been in this job for weeks, so I've got to, we've got to look at this properly. They're big decisions. We're very committed to delivering, what's in the integrated rail plan, and there are a number of options for how we deliver high-speed services to Leeds, and that's what I'm looking at. Those options and decisions will be taken in due course.
Indeed. So it sounds at least that there is a decision pending on that. But another promise that Liz Truss made regards the Doncaster Sheffield Airport, perfectly good airport that, as things stand, is now going to go entirely to waste. That, coupled with that high-speed line, could turn that part of the country into a powerhouse. So is it possible that you, in your role as Transport Secretary, will look again at Doncaster Sheffield?
Well, look, Doncaster Sheffield is obviously owned by a private company,
and they turned down public money.
They've had some offer of support from local authorities, and I know they're looking at some bids that have been made for the airport. That's a decision for them. I know my predecessor, and indeed I've asked the aviation minister to continue working both with the company to encourage them to look at those bids seriously, and also, I've spoken to local members of Parliament, and the aviation minister will continue to do so, and we encourage them to look at constructive solutions for that airport.
Can we conclude our discussion this morning by referring to your former Conservative Party colleague, Matt Hancock?
Sure.
I just want to read you this quote from the Deputy Chairman of his local Conservative association. "I'm looking forward to him eating a kangaroo's penis. Quote me, you can quote me on that." Andy, we certainly have. Will you be looking forward to watching Mr Hancock eating kangaroo penis?
No,
I can't believe I'm saying this on television. It's the high point of my career.
Well, I'm not going to say it on television. Look, on this situation, I think, as a former Chief Whip, I very much support the decision the Chief Whip has taken, which is members of Parliament's first responsibility when Parliament is sitting, is to serve their constituents.
And the Chief Whip more than that, he was the Health Secretary during the COVID pandemic, and the COVID inquiry is about to start. It is a complete derogation of his responsibilities, isn't it, to go away and mince around in the jungle for a couple of weeks?
The Chief Whip's made the position clear, which is he's made a decision that going on I'm a Celebrity is not compatible with doing your job properly as a Member of Parliament, which is why the whip's been taken away. And as a former Chief Whip, I completely support those decisions taken by my successor.
Would you support him standing down as an MP?
Well, look, he's now currently
a by-election.
he now currently doesn't have the Conservative whip, so he's sitting as an independent Member of Parliament. What he chooses to do in the future is a matter of him. The Chief Whip's made the position of the Conservative Party very clear, which is members of Parliament should focus on doing their job, serving their constituents in their constituencies and in the House of Commons.
I would bet that if the tables were turned that this was a Labour politician, you would be calling for there to be a by-election over this.
Well, look, decisions about whether people stand at the future election are for them, but the Chief Whip's made it very clear it's not acceptable for Conservative members of Parliament to go on celebrity television programmes when Parliament's sitting. Our job is to represent our constituents in our constituencies and in the House of Commons. That position is very clear. I think my colleagues will have looked at that signal from the Chief Whip and the Prime Minister about what the appropriate behaviour is, and I'm sure the lessons will be learned by my colleagues.
Will you be, like me, assigning the number to nominate him for Bush Tucker Trials to your speed dial?
Well, I think that will remain between me and my phone, I think.
Mark Harper, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks very much.